So welcome back to Write Out Loud, the podcast where stories take center stage and creativity knows no bounds. And joining me, as always, is the captivating, clever, and contagiously charismatic Christina.
You're going to run out of alliteration things to say eventually.
Oh, never, never, never. She is the queen of quips, the conqueror of compelling characters, and the curator of countless creative conundrums.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Today, we're going to be talking about TV show release schedules and whether the all-at-once dump that Netflix kind of made famous is the way to go, or does the weekly release have the advantage? And why? How does that shape up? So sit tight, grab your favorite warm beverage, and let's get right to it. So, yeah.
Yeah. And we are going to make some correlations, too, with publishing. And does the person who publishes once a year have a disadvantage over somebody who publishes more frequently, more like not necessarily once a month, but like quarterly or something like that. So we're going to make some correlations with that as well. So this topic came to me because I started to realize that I was going through a little bit of a bad time. We talked about a little bit in our opening that I've had, some difficult times. My aunt passed away, and just recently, my beloved dog of 17 years died. And so I was not reading, couldn't focus. And so I kind of started binging TV shows. And I realized that I was actually counting on social media to find my TV shows. And what do I mean by that other than everybody else looking at it? I started to notice I was finding TV shows from social media, but they were all weekly release shows.
Okay.
And the fact that I got so heavily involved with these people I don't know online, and it became that water cooler talk of old. I remember back in the days when I worked for Borders, before social media, the guy in the cube next to me watched Lost and I watched Lost. And we would come in every single morning and be like, oh my God, did you see last night's episode? And the thing is, what I noticed with online now this year with The Pit, I'm trying to think of, oh God, there were a slew of them that were this year that I didn't start thinking about watching until I saw people reacting to it. And they were all these weekly releases because it's so much more difficult to talk about online in the same way. The dump shows, like the dump shows, not everybody watches them in the same time frame. Example, The Diplomat. Great show, wonderful. But I never really got to talk to anybody about it because some people hadn't seen it, or we were on different parts of the binge and I didn't want to be online and have it ruined. Sure. And so I really started to notice we like the shows that have the slower week by week release for several reasons. A, it was already being talked about, so I kind of had a verification that it was going to be good. And not okay, I'm going into this show and I have no idea if it's any good or if anybody has seen it or anything like that.
Right.
With the slow release, also really did build up week to week with the anticipation. Because they still have that kind of cliffhanger ending that if you binged it, you'd still jump into the next episode. Yes.
Yep.
But like for the next week, you got excited and was like, okay, when does the episode drop? You know, what time does this streamer release it the night before? You know, because
Right.
I'm a little bit of a late night person. I usually don't go to sleep until 11 or 12 at night. And so in that short window there, I go, okay, which streamer has this on now? Kind of hit that refresh button until, you know, it comes in. And yes, to an extent, you do that with the dump releases when it first releases. Like I'm anticipating Stranger Things. I will perhaps get up at 2 a.m. or whatever it is, the release time, to watch. But it kind of loses its effect. I feel more of a communal watching when it's a weekly release versus a solitary watch when it's a dump release.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it's all super valid. I think there have been times when I know personally we've sat and watched shows and we kind of gravitated towards the ones that dumped out initially because only because we had gotten to a point where we hated ads. We hated waiting for cliffhangers. Like we wanted to just be able to see it all. Like we didn't want to have to wait for the next episode. And gradually over time that changed though. So it's really funny because we had this whole sort of stance and we're like, nope, we're just going to do the dump release. Anything that just comes out all at once, we don't want to wait. Or we would, if it was a weekly release, we would actually wait until all of them were out and available and then watch them all at once. Right.
Yes.
But it makes it much harder to avoid the spoilers if you do it that way. So not dump releases, but waiting until a weekly release is fully out. It makes it harder to avoid spoilers. It makes it harder to be a part of what you're talking about, right? Because you are waiting until the end. And by that point, everybody's kind of moved on. So there's kind of give and take in both, right? I think there's pieces of that. But I would say that over time, our attraction to it has gotten to a point where we are very similar in line to what you are now, which is we want it weekly. We want it to just, we want to watch it while it's happening.
I find that I have less time, and I don't know exactly what is eating up this time, but I find that I have less time to do the binge watch. I don't I don't have 8 to 12 hours that I can binge. So I'll split them up. And like you said, I find I have to start watching for spoilers. I used to be just like you, that if it was a weekly release, I would wait until the entire series is out and then I'd start. That changed somewhere in there where I now would rather watch it as it comes out. Again, I think part of it, again, has to do with engagement with other people that are like, it becomes that thing that you talk about at the water cooler.
Yeah, for sure.
And even with my online friends, it used to be that, I could binge watch something in one sitting, but then I'd have to wait for them to catch up or whatever. And with weekly releases, I don't have to do that. Everybody gets to watch it within that 1 week. And I would say most people tend to watch it in that week that it releases. They may not watch it that night. And let me be clear in the sense where when I say weekly releases, I am not talking about standard TV. I am talking streamers. I don't find many shows with the big three or whatever they are, cable network television shows. Very, very few keep my attention, and even furthermore, very, very few, even less, can do it for more than a season or two. And I wonder if it's because, I know it's because the writing seems to get less with each season. I used to be a big fan of Fire Country, and this season of Fire Country, I'm so done with it.
Oh no. Yeah.
It is the same code over and over. The characters act exactly the same. No behaviors are changing and they're not growing and learning. And this year they did something really big, and I think it was totally the wrong thing to do. And I honestly, I forget that it's even on, and it's my DVR that has to remind me of, oh, yeah, okay, that was on. I suppose I should catch up on the episode. So I'm not talking about that kind of TV. Although, I will say, you and I talked about this, not in any of our previous episodes, but you and I have talked about this, High Potential. That's the only one. But I just found it. And I, of course, binged it over several days to catch up to this season. So, but I've been able to watch each one of them as I will. This is actually the first week that I have to wait for the next one to come. But again, that's also not to say that show is going to last, because I've found, again, with regular TV, network TV, that I may be in for the first year or two, but by year 3, it's waning. So there's something with the writing when they get further into seasons that I just I don't care for. So I do think
for us, I think there's some shows that have that staying power, right? That have the ability to keep writing and all that. But it's interesting too that you talk about the fact that Fire Country for you was very formulaic, that it just became the same repetitive thing over and over again, and it wasn't really keeping your interest. And I think when we talk about dump releases versus the weekly cadence to it, right? That there's a lot more potential for things to go awry that way. And I think there's a couple ways this happens. One is you have a show that just gets formulaic. So to your point, it just continues to be the same thing every week in, week out. And you could argue to some degree, some shows are able to pull that off better than others. So for example, High Potential is kind of formulaic in the sense that it's going to be, you kind of know what the whole layout of the episode is going to do, but there's enough subplot built in and there's enough character development built in where it keeps you interested. You start to see these relationships change a little bit, even if their behaviors don't really change necessarily.
Yeah.
But then you have shows like Fire Country. Maybe I haven't seen it, so I can't really speak to that one, but I can tell you another sort of phenomenon of this is the 911 series. So 911 over time has been very much the same. Again, there's going to be some sort of major emergency that happens. They all have to go out. They have to be found, right? The main one has, again, same thing. There's some subplots happening that you can kind of see woven throughout. There's some other character growth that's happening, but they're spinoffs.
Yeah.
And to some degree, even the main 911, but their spinoffs kind of have a whole other issue. So I think when you have a weekly release, you have this need. And I think it's very easy to give into this as a writer, that you have to constantly up the ante. You have to constantly ratchet up the pressure to the point where you eventually get to an episode where people go, okay, I'm done with this because this is ridiculous now. This season on 911, sorry if you haven't seen this already, but it's been in the first few episodes, so you've had plenty of time to catch up to it. They are in space, and one man was swallowed by a whale. And it just gets to a point where you're we've really gotten to a part, unless somebody falls into a crack in the earth and slides into the lava, I don't know what else you could do. You can't get any bigger than what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's this tendency for the writers to kind of feel like they have to do this to keep people engaged. And I don't know that that's true.
Yeah. No. And actually, when you were talking about High Potential, I think with that, even though it is form where every episode a crime is solved, the subplot of the missing, I guess, I don't think he was ever the spouse, but yes, the ex, the daughter's father,
Roman.
That is woven in, and a slower moving mystery where we get little nuggets, maybe not every episode, but every other episode, there's another little, okay, we've gotten an update on that little thing. The other thing is character growth. I do see, even though these characters are behaving in a way that may seem formulaic, you can actually see their growth. So this, I would put more akin to My go-to show for character growth, if you're going to look at it, is The Bear. Because character on season 1, episode 1, that is basically hated by the audience. By episode 7, that first season, and the episode is called Forks. And I will throw down with anyone that is one of the best television episodes ever. Because you actually see the character growth, not just over the course, but like click in that episode. And so with High Potential, not that I can pinpoint, oh, this is the episode that this character see that growth come to fruition like you can with The Bear. I see the character growth. And even though I've not watched 911, I of course see the commercials for 911 and think to myself, oh, okay, 911 in space. Yep. And actually the one that got me was the one with the bees, when the bees came in. Again, haven't seen it, but that didn't drive me to see it. So to your point with, do we have to keep escalating? The escalation isn't happening because they're trying to gain new audience. The escalation seems to be happening to maintain the audience.
Yeah.
And that's just ridiculous. And that's just ridiculous because I think you're going to lose them. The way to, you need to maintain that to give yourself these episodes of this show that is about this thing without keeping it boring. You do have to show change in other ways. Like I said, if you take characterization, character growth, a subplot that isn't solved. For example, Lost. Lost was one of those that if they had only question after question after question, no answers, gets the audience frustrated. So you kind of have to, what I call a leapfrog question, and maybe not the answer to that one, but you answer something else, and then you lay down another question and there's an answer. And again, it doesn't have to be an answer to that same question. You can leapfrog and like, hey, 5 episodes, we had this question. Here's the answer to that. So you have to keep it moving in that way. As far as escalation, though, I think some TV is getting absolutely ridiculous. But that's also because I do think we are absolutely going through a growth and change. And I'm going to say this just in general, across the board. Like myself, I feel myself growing and changing. I mean, obviously, I've had such a year that requires that.
Sure.
But I don't think I'm the only one. And I think people are experiencing it in different ways. And I find myself, rather than like in those moments of, okay, I need something that's just brain candy, which I don't really have to think about. I'm not necessarily going to go, oh, let me go check out 911. That's completely ridiculous.
But
heavy. I do find myself, again, I went to High Potential, which is a little bit outside of the norm. Police detective agent department is probably not going to hire someone who can come in and look at a crime scene differently, but it's a play on the original Monk, Psych.
Sure. Murder, She Wrote.
Murder, She Wrote did that? I've never seen Murder,
She
Wrote.
Kind of. I mean, like, you think of somebody who's not a cop, right? Like helping the police try to solve.
You're saying, yeah. What I'm thinking about is those people that see crime scenes differently because they're, in her case, it's this high potential intellect or whatever. In Monk's case, it was probably more like autism or something of that degree.
Sure.
But I still was not in the mood for completely wackadoo television.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is, the name of the game is getting to keep your audience. And I think that applies to writing as well. And I think if you are able to tell your stories and release them in a way that keeps that audience engaged, so there's a cadence enough there, whether that's monthly, I hope it's not weekly because that's a lot, but like monthly for the stories that are that large or that having to write
and I would
it out.
Even say, I would even say that I don't know anybody that can release monthly and maintain a good story. I think there are people that are capable of doing like maybe every other month, but more like every 3 months, which is essentially quarterly.
Yeah.
4 times a year. I don't actually think beyond, so I'm not talking about those series where you have multiple authors and then they release month by month by month by month. I think that's actually a great thing if you can bring those stories together in some way. Like Harlequin used to do this with what they called a continuity series, meaning they develop a town and then these stories would be set in that town.
Sure.
And they'd create a Bible and they'd use, here's the map of the town, and this person owns the bookstore and this person owns the coffee shop next door. Those types of things, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about one single person writing those amount of stories. And in fact, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, that with most writers, I think if you are putting yourself into a position of you want quality, which you do want quality over quantity, and that means figuring out, can I write in good quality more than one book a year? And I think there are so few people that can do 2 books, 3 books, 4 books, most especially 4 books. 2 books might be okay. In my experience, people that I've worked with are capable of doing 1 a year, maybe 2, like every other year. So like every 9 months, that person releases a book. I think if you're talking every 6 months, it gets a little bit more difficult. Those people, let me reframe that. Those people that can write more than 1 book a year are probably full-time writers. Like that's their only
for
job.
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
you'd have to be.
Anybody beyond that, probably with life and everything else, like I said, 1 to maybe 1 book every 9 months, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, and again, the whole idea is just making sure that you're focused on the pacing of that story. Like the pacing is going to be everything, that you have to be able to make sure that it's measured out, that no matter if you decide to release it all at once, no matter if you do decide to release it weekly, you've got enough there to keep people engaged and talking about it along the way. I think word of mouth advertising is always going to be the strongest when it comes to those types of things. So to your point, I think the weekly release probably has it in the bag that way.
Yeah.
Because it generates enough of that interest and to keep things going. And I think, again, the artists and the authors who can maintain that kind of consistency and release schedule are going to see a much easier time.
Yeah. And I think that with television and the weekly release, with streamers specifically, I mean, I could see it with network television too, if there was this really fantastic show, but that's for marketing. That's how I find shows, is via online. It's so much harder. Like I am not the type of person that I'd be there all night looking and watching trailers and figuring out, you know, I need other people to tell me what they have found good. And then, of course, I may or may not. And I do think it's the same with the books. If you're a newbie author, the way to do it, maybe you do have like a series that you're going to start. Maybe finish 3 books in that series before you release them, and then release them every 2 months to get that publicity and momentum going or something like that. So I think there's ways of doing it and doing it for the marketing, but the number one thing is quality.
Yep.
Quality over quantity, and I will never change my mind on that.
And TV writers, please, for the love of God, stop ratcheting up the ante here. Stop making it so that it has to get more and more outrageous. Just because I tell you, I will, as long as that quality story is there, They don't have to be
Yeah.
they don't have to be going to space for me to keep dialing in and watching and hearing your story be told. It's not necessary, right? It is not necessary at all. Well, very good. Well, that should wrap up then our episode of Right Out Loud. So we've explored that tug of war between the weekly release and the Netflix famous Binge-a-thon, and how each approach really can inspire or even challenge us, right, as we are bringing new stories into the world. So whether you're crafting a slow burn series or planning a big release, remember, pacing is part of that experience. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep on creating and keep writing out loud. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. We really hope that you're enjoying every bit of it, but we would love to hear your feedback. Drop us an email either to matt@writeoutloudpod.com or Christina@bookmatchmaker.com. We would love to hear your thoughts. What's working, what's not working, and what do you want to hear more of? Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.